Again, I have my palette knife, so if I pick up some paint, if it's too much, I can remove it onto my paper towel here on the bottom. Now, okay. Any questions about materials? Pretty self-explanatory, right? Notice I'm working with a very limited palette. Why? Because this is how you should start your painting, your preliminary paintings. I have some alizarin crimson, I have some cobalt blue, and then I have some yellows. I have a lot of the cadmiums. Okay. Then I have my second. Oop, my paper towel got stuck in it. It's fine. So I always use my paper towel to kind of open the tubes, because if they ever get dried out, if it's too hard to open, don't hurt your hand. Use the paper towel to go over it, and then it should open. It should. It could dry a little bit more. It's okay. Let's see, I can remove some of this and add a little bit of water. It's fine. Now, how do we begin? Throughout this process, what you can do, let's use some red. Okay, I like to, again, expand it, stretch it out. Lift it up, put it down, lift it up, put it down. And always, always, you want to have enough of the actual paint on your palette. It's a little hard to see. I apologize, guys. The lighting here in my kitchen is the worst. Okay, I can dilute it with water. And what I like to do is always, always, always use a sheet of canvas pads, okay, as a sort of preliminary swatch. So I'll literally make a swatch and see how the color looks. Okay, you can again dilute it with water. Just to get an idea of, again, value. So that's one information, right? Pretty self-explanatory, correct? Now, I do have my brush. What will happen if I add white? So I'm gonna take a little bit of white and just mix it. You get this nice, almost pink color. You guys see that? Almost like a lighter violet pink. Dilute that with water. Okay. I'm gonna let that area dry. I always like to have a paper towel in my hand, so if I have excess paint, I could always just, dip it in some water, clean it up, so ready to go. Now, what would happen if I added, let's pick up some of this red. Let's add the color without any value of red, of white. I'll add it right there. That's pretty deep, right? I have to then remember that this will be my darkest value if I'm working with a what? Monochromatic palette. This will be my deepest value if I'm working with a monochromatic palette, okay? Does that make sense so far? But then now I'm going to do something really strange. Let's add a complementary color to the red. How do you make a complementary green? Who knows this process? What do I do? Guys, this is a question for you. What do you think? What should I do? How do I make it green for my palette? What colors
I
do I?
was gonna say start with blue and yellow, but you lost me on complementary green.
The complementary green will be the complementary of this color, which is the red. So, and who is speaking? Marissa?
Yes, that's me.
So Marissa, you were right. You make blue and you add some yellow. I'm taking a lot so we can. Notice you always want to lift all that color again and then blend it. But notice it's still a little too dark. That's pretty dark of a green. I'm going to lift it all up and then have just enough so I can spread it. I'm going to clean my palette knife. Nice and clean. I'm going to add more yellow right around here. And I'm going to gradually mix it in there. That's a nice color green right there. See that? A little bit more yellow. Until I'm happy with a nice value of green, and then I can stop. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. I'm just sort of spreading it out, lifting it, molding it on there. It's like cake frosting. You could feel the consistency. You could feel it. Once you get resistance, it starts to dry. Okay. What do we think? Is that a good enough green? I think that's a good enough green. Yeah. Now, if I have some red here, right? I'm going to take some red. I'm going to mix it to the green. It almost becomes like a muddy brown. See that? So now let's see what that looks like. Do you guys see this? This almost muddy earth brown. This is the natural brown that was made with those color combinations. You could dilute that with water. And you almost have a what? A yellow ochre. Almost. Similarly. You guys see that? Now what happens if I add more red to that color? It's the same color. See what happens here. Now this is a more like a kind of sienna red. It's more green. Let's dilute that with some water. Isn't that interesting? With the limited palette, you can get some really great yellow ochres, some siennas, burnt sienna, right? But then if I added more of the green to the red, you get more green red. So this is complementary green to my monochromatic red. Does that make sense so far? I'm just mixing. We're not even working on the paintings yet, guys. Okay. Then now if I switched over, if I added more yellow, because that's on my color palette, closer to my analogous palettes, which is side by side on my color wheel. If I make an orange, yellow to this. I want to find a nice consistent orange. But then if I go back, I can use this in the painting. And then remembered, how did I sort of create this? I added more yellow to the orange. There's no green in here. You guys see that? But then I can take more white. And again, change the lightness or darkness by adding a tint of the white as a what? Highlight. Okay. So that is more of the lighter orange, which is similar to the color palette with analogous color combinations next to the red. But then if I added more of the red to this color, what happens? You get an almost sort of blush pink with a little bit of yellow. And this is a great flesh tone color when you're painting skin, which is great. A little bit more white to this, actually. There you go. That's a good color. While it's still wet, dilute it with some water. And now I have a great understanding of what? Color combinations. So far, monochromatic, complementary, okay? Analogous. All color combinations. These are just swatches that we made, guys. Okay. What questions do we have so far? The limited palette. All you need. Questions so far? No questions? Okay. So now what I'm gonna do is use a reference for the demonstration. And I'm gonna use again, basic monochromatic palette first. Just grab my reference, bear with me. Now I'm going to use a reference that, again, I just found on the internet. It's completely up to you, Those of you who have one that you would like me to use for the demonstration, let me know. Let me pull up the reference now. Now, actually, the image is a little blurry. What I wanted to use is this image here, but for some odd reason, it's very blurry, probably because of the resolution. This was from a scene from the film Princess Mononoke, which was a wonderful film that came out of, I think it was Japan, and back in 1999 by Hayao Miyazaki. I'm going to find a better resolution of this image first and go from there. Because I would like to use something that's based, oh, here it is. That's something that could be based off of a sort of an interesting concept or idea that I'm personally interested in, rather than looking at something just for exercising, sort of looking at something for the sake of just looking at something. Now, what I notice, you guys can see this, correct? You guys, give me a yes or no.
I can see it.
Yes, I can see it.
I can
Perfect.
see it.
Yep.
What I'm gonna do is, obviously the image is a lot longer than my canvas paper, but I'm gonna start to exaggerate and cut off some of the picture plane. And I'm gonna say, what, right about here? And I'm gonna crop it. Okay. And I have to decide and say, okay, am I happy? Oh, what happened? Am I happy with it? Okay, I can change it. I can change my color temperature. Okay, I could change my exposure, contrast, right? Lights and darks, whatever it is. You can change the saturation to black and white. You can change it to full saturation to have really exaggerated colors. You could change the temperature, cooler, warmer. Notice how dramatically different those images become, right? So within this process, okay, I'm going to have this pulled up on my screen. So bear with me. But I'm going to use this for the demo, unless if we have any objections. And it's okay if you do. Okay. So what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to take my canvas pads and I'm going to tape my edges. Okay. Let me zoom out. I want to show the palette. Okay. I'm going to make a small preliminary, again, monochromatic painting. What I like to do, guys, and if you want to, again, follow along, you're more than happy to. Tape off the edge. You could do 1 inch on the sides or 1 inch on the bottom or top. The reason why, again, by applying the tape, you don't want it to be messy and like the canvas pads to buckle, because they will buckle if you don't apply too much tape. I'm actually going to raise the bottom because I want it more elongated, sort of wider. Again, because the measurements are not necessarily more important through this process. It's really the color combinations that are probably the most important. Okay. Okay. We all can see this. I have that image pulled up. So what I like to do, again, really briefly, not worrying about any of the detail. Okay, I'm going to use, what color should I use actually? Blue? Since we use red already. Let's use blue. Why not? Okay, what I'm gonna do, take some blue. Just water it down. You don't use your slow drying medium here, guys. It's really, you don't have to, but I think you should save it for your larger painting. And I'm just gonna start drawing it out. And this is what I mean, again, about drawing the painting, okay? Really using that time to draw out the composition. And it's really simple, okay? Meaning that it doesn't have to look precise, okay? That's that sort of branch. We have here, this branch here. We have this sort of hillside, or this kind of foliage here on the bottom. Notice it's just a lot of water because I want to wash. I don't want to add too much color. Here's the branch that the main character is on. Forget the character's name. I think it's Haku. No, that's from Spirited Away. Forget his name. A little branch here, the rock. Here's where the water is. And again, you're just experimenting with figuring out not only the composition. Notice I'm using the flat side. Now, if this is drying too fast, add some slow drying medium. The character is probably right around. Just blocking it in. There's a waterfall behind. And again, if you want to follow along, guys, I will also upload this image on there too. So if you need to use this for the demo, you're more than happy to. Or just for practicing, actually. You want to take your time. And I notice in this area here, there's a lot of value of light. So I'm going to add some white. A lot of white, actually. And some water to kind of fill this in. And you almost want to think about this as a wash, a light wash. And I'm at another tone of value for the waterfall. And the actual water. And I'm just gradually adding a a little bit at a time. Because I want the value to separate from lighter blue to lightest blue. And this is what happens when you work again with the monochromatic palette. A little goes a long way. And it relieves a lot more of the stress to have fun and experiment with all those color combinations. Now let's add an intense blue. The darkest value will probably be here. You can already see that's pretty bright. There's also some here. And you're just blocking that in. Right? Some down here. See how quickly I'm working? Not worrying about any of those details at all, because I don't need to. I just want to map out the composition first and see if I'm happy with it. Now I'm just adding a wash. You could use your fan brush to do this to go faster. And just following along these rocks. And you want to build upon the colors of value by just adding the blue. Because once these areas are dry, I can always add more light or dark. So part of this assignment would be to finish all analogous, complementary, and monochromatic palettes with your preliminary paintings by next week, as well as your completed painting presenting next week. And again, this sort
I
of,
just wanted to ask a question. I'm so sorry I cut you off. I wanted to ask a question for clarification.
oh, absolutely, go ahead.
So is it that we are doing the complementary, the analogous, and the monochromatic, and then also the big portrait painting on the big canvas?
Yep,
Okay.
it's a lot of work, but I know we can do it. I would just say, guys, pace yourselves. Take your time. Don't rush it. And this is what we mean by drawing the painting. Oh, my water is cross-contaminating, so you can see it's getting a little browner because the container is a little muddy from what we were mixing before. And this is what you should be doing in terms of, again, sort of thinking about simplifying and understanding how to use which color to the painting and seeing how it evolves even further by experimentation. I do expect this does take a lot of time. So each of them should probably take what, 15, 20 minutes each. Okay. What other questions do we have? No questions. I'm going over some of those whites. And you can go back and forth, guys. There is no wrong way to do it. Because again, this is a learning process. But I'm only using white and blue, which is my main color choice. How does it look? I can't even see it on my end. Let me zoom out. Oh, interesting. Did this make sense so far? Let's see if we remove the tape. You should wait for it to dry, but I'm just removing the tape to see how it looks. Okay. Now, guys, again, a part of this process would be to do one monochromatic, again, complementary, and then analogous. Before you get into your large canvases. Really, you want to be experimenting throughout this process. So take a sheet of canvas pads and start mixing some of those color combinations, diluting it with water, changing the viscosity, and see what happens. Okay, let me go back to my desk.